questions to be asked over on the Israeli side, but what about our own intelligence capabilities? What about a failure within our own apparatus? What have you learned? What kind of questions are you asking? What kind of reforms are necessary? Congressman Waltz.
No, thanks, Lee. And obviously I can only get into so much detail, but I'm not convinced it was the intelligence failure that we're being led to believe that it was. I do think we picked up indicators, and the problem is if our analysts, our collectors are pushing those indicators up to our policymakers that are either ignorantly or willfully on the side of Iran, were they then ignored? And when you have the lead negotiator for the Obama administration, Rob Malley, who was then the lead negotiator for the Biden administration, Rob Malley, that were obsessed with the Iran deal 2.0. And oh, by the way, his entire ring is still sitting in government. He's being investigated by the FBI. His security clearance has been pulled. But Tabatabai is the chief of staff for special operations in the Pentagon. Right now, today, she is sitting on top secret systems with our most compartmented information across our most sensitive programs against Iran. And she hasn't been removed. This administration won't remove her. But we're getting it after it, Lee, and we're digging hard because I believe there is a scandal and a conspiracy here that only House Republicans can uncover. And then second thing, I don't believe this was an intelligence problem. This is a policy problem. When President Trump left office, Iran's foreign currency reserves had gone from 70 billion to 4 billion. And they have now quadrupled back again. Their oil sales had gone to nearly nothing, 100,000 barrels per day. Now they're bringing in 30 billion per year. They are flush with cash. We have ignored sanctions. We've given waiver after waiver, all in this obsession. And so this equivocation of, well, they were complicit, but we don't think they were directly involved. I don't know what they're looking for, the Ayatollah to have been on the radio with Hamas's fighters. I mean, it's just flies in the face of it. And so I think it is a policy problem, and I think, frankly, it is an Iran complicity problem in the most senior levels of the Biden administration. I do not think it was a collection problem.
Congressman Bacon, when President Biden released his supplemental request, some were surprised to see the Ukraine element so much more than the funding for Israel. If you can comment from your perspective as to whether or not you thought this was the appropriate amount for Israel that the president requested, if you can share any insight as to how that money might get spent. Obviously, this group is very interested in knowing what the details really are of what President Biden is requesting from Congress.
Thank you. I agree with every of the presidential candidates but one today. The United States must support Israel, period. And the request for the president was $15 billion, roughly. And so annually, we typically provide Israel about $3.5 billion, and it's a win-win. A lot of the stuff, these weapons are co-produced, the technology is co-produced. It is really a win-win relationship. So the president's gone in with about $15 billion. I'd say we should approve it. We should do it ASAP, as soon as possible. And if it ends up 4 or 5 or 6 months from now needing more, we'll do that. And so I think the amount for now is all right. We should put it immediate on the priority list in the House to get that passed. Now let's talk about Ukraine. It is of my view that an independent Ukraine is in our national security interest. That does not mean we have to do exactly what the president wants. He has to defend his budget. He should do an itemized explanation of what he wants. I'll give you one example. A lot of the requests he's given us in the past, I thought were good for maintaining the gridlock. But why didn't we do ATACMS? Why weren't we providing weapons that could actually win the war? Just this last month, he provided ATACMS for the first time. So Congress has a role here. He has to defend what he requests, and we have a chance to help shape what we give, when we give it, and so I think we have that role there. But in the end, Putin says he wants to restore his old borders. Ukraine is just one phase of that. So we also need to be supporting Ukraine. And let me just add one more on the supplemental. He wants money for the border to help move people around. That's a no-go in the U.S. House. We need policy changes, not money, just to move people around in the United States. We could fix what's broken at the border by changing the law and changing how we handle when people come in as refugees or seeking asylum. Putting more money there just means we're facilitating what's broken. And so that part of the supplemental is dead on arrival.
Well, Congressman Donalds and Congressman Banks, I'm going to ask you about Iran. Congressman Donalds, I like to brag, I was his freshman mentor last Congress, so anything good that Byron ever does that meets your blessing, I'll take credit for. Everything else, you'll blame Banks or Bacon. But we love Byron. He serves now on the House Financial Services Committee, so I want to talk to you a little bit about the economic pressure aspect of an instrument of national power, the sanctions, what you see on the committee that might get done going forward, possibly new sanctions, new teeth in dealing with Iran. What do you want to see? But from your perspective as a member of the House Financial Services Committee now.
Well, there we go. We're back. So a couple things. I think that the sanction regime that was there under President Trump should have never left. You have Joe Biden, who decided to take his foot off the neck of Iran. I mean, Mike Waltz was just talking about that. Just go back to that sanctions regime. House Financial Services Committee, yeah, we would love to do more. The question is, well, hold on. Let me not ask Joe Biden what he wants to do, because it's probably going to be wrong. What we need to do is examine what is effective from a sanctions position on Iran and on the terrorist groups that they support. We got to squeeze all that out of there. We shouldn't allow them to just operate freely in the global economy, knowing that all they're going to do is perpetuate terror against free countries, including Israel, all the time. We can't have that. So go back to the previous sanctions regime under President Trump. Do that first. If House Financial Services needs to do more, we will step up and do that. I'm glad we actually have a Speaker of the House now in Mike Johnson, so Patrick McHenry can go back to chairing that committee so we can go back and review all of those different aspects of it. On a broader perspective, look, I'm a free trade person. I'm a laissez-faire economics individual. That's my basis. But you cannot have a global economy if you know aspects of that money is going to go to spread terror. Because spreading terror actually defeats the entire purpose of a growing, functioning economy based upon free trade and free ideas. Nobody's going to sell widgets if you're afraid of how you're going to get home at night, or if you're afraid that missiles are going to be fired into your country, or you're afraid that hostages are going to be taken. There will be no ability for a stable economy across the globe. So sanctions regime is critical in order to pull that money out of these regimes like Iran, so you can have a global harmony where people can just be tolerant of each other, live in harmony and peace, and then we can also make money, trade, etc., and try to continue this experiment, not just here in America, but around the globe.
Yeah, picking up on that, Congressman Banks, there's no way that Hamas carries out this act without being resourced and blessed by Iran. And we're sitting there watching the news. Why isn't anyone in the Biden administration calling out Iran and speaking truth? On 9/11, they give $6 billion of a ransom payment. On September 11th, they give a $6 billion ransom payment to Iran, and they're trying to lecture all of us like money isn't fungible. Congressman Banks, picking up on what Congressman Donalds was just talking about, what are you proposing? Because I think you have something special to announce here for everyone who'd be really interested in this.
Yeah, so we have to go back to what we know worked, and that's the maximum pressure campaign. Byron put it very well. Under Trump, we put our foot on the neck of Iran and their economy, and it worked, and it cut off funding to Hezbollah and Hamas in the process. Last Congress, I introduced the Maximum Pressure Act to codify the Pompeo-Trump 12 points of the maximum pressure campaign, and we had 140 co-sponsors in the Congress, including Billy Long, including the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, a broad group of 140 Republicans. But Lee, we were in the minority then. Now we're in the majority. Now we control our own destiny. It's time for Congress to act, and that's why this week I'm reintroducing the maximum pressure campaign act that's endorsed by RJC. We have 70 original co-sponsors already. You can help by reaching out to your member of Congress today and asking them to sign on to it. It's just that simple. We know it worked under Trump. When President Trump got us out of the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, that was a very important moment. But then Biden comes back to the White House and he immediately wants to renegotiate and reopen the deal. I ask many of my friends on the left, who is the political constituency to renegotiate another Iran nuclear deal? And even they can't answer it. There's no political constituency in America except for the pro-Hamas caucus that controls the Democrat Party today that wants us to reopen another Iran nuclear deal and appease the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. We can't let them get away with it anymore.
These are honorable men who live a life of integrity, but they were all aware that Billy Long was offering a $45 bill for the first person who mentioned his name. So, Jim Banks, congratulations.
We miss Lee Zeldin.
I knew what I was doing.
So Congressman Waltz, obviously this is a group really interested in knowing what's at the top of the plate right now for the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman Waltz is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, so if you can give us a little insight, what's at the top of the agenda?
Well, I will tell you, if I could just add to what Jim Banks was just talking about on the hostages. My wife is with us today, Julia Neshawat. She was President Trump's hostage negotiator in the State Department. And let me tell you something. And also a combat veteran, more tours than I have. So, you know, you husbands out there, you never win an argument. I literally never win an argument, ever. But listen, President Trump got 63 hostages out from all over the world. North Korea, Iran, we can walk around the world, Venezuela, Colombia, never paid a dime. There is a reason that so many, a record number of hostages were just taken, because what does the entire world learn? The price has gone way up for what they can get. You take a celebrity, you get the world's largest arms dealer in Victor Bout. You take Americans in Iran, under the first Iran deal, it was about $400 million per head in pallets of cash. Now that's tripled to $1.2 billion. This administration is rewarding and therefore incentivizing the taking of hostages around the world. And the message has to be flipped on its head. And this we are working on out of the Foreign Affairs Committee. You touch the hair on an American's head, and all hell is going to be released on you. And mandatory sanctions are going to come in place. So if you get a weak president like Biden, it's going to come out of the Congress. The other piece is, look, China is buying Iran's oil, left, right, and center. And we are going to pass out of the Foreign Affairs Committee secondary sanctions on their ports, secondary sanctions on their shipping companies, secondary sanctions on their banks and other financial institutions. Once we start raising the cost for China for buying Iran's oil, I don't know, maybe they won't have anywhere to sell it. And we get a secondary hit in terms of turning the screws on the greatest adversary that we've ever faced, which is the Chinese Communist Party. So we are, as Representative Banks was just saying, we in the Congress are going to have to codify in law because these sanctions, because otherwise you're going to have Biden throwing them away every chance he can get. That's what we're up to in House Foreign Affairs.
I have a question for Congressman Banks, and then one final question for Congressman Donalds and Congressman Bacon. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for your help with last year's races. How good it feels for us as Republicans that these men are in the majority right now in the House, that we have a check and balance on President Biden and the Senate Democrats. I see Ed Cox, the chairman of the New York State Republican Party, is here. We have now the most Republican delegation in New York that we've had in 30 years. And we, from red states, purple states, blue states, they're working together and they're in a majority. We need to expand that majority. So thank you for everything you're doing for the RJC, because they made such a big impact in making sure that gavels were in the hands of these gentlemen. They're doing a great job with that. And one of the ways that we've seen that play out is former Speaker Kevin McCarthy created a select committee on China, which Congressman Banks is an active member on. So if Congressman Banks could just spend a minute and giving us a little bit of insight on that committee, what you're working on, what do you think's ahead?
Before I do, let me say this. Lee Zeldin, we miss you in Congress. You are a great American. I learned so much from you watching you as a new member of Congress, and we hope to have you back someday. So the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, I believe, is former Speaker McCarthy's biggest legacy. It is a bipartisan, full committee. We have many goals, but the biggest goal is to develop a whole-of-government strategy to take on the biggest adversary that America faces today. The Chinese Communist Party is the biggest threat to our American way of life, and something that's important to each and every one of us in this room, and that's our religious liberty. And so we've tried to draw more attention to the threat. What does the threat mean? I believe our biggest goal, Lee, in this Congress is to stop the flow of American investment dollars to our biggest enemy. It's unbelievable to me that our federal and almost every state pension in America invest in China's military, the very military that wants to wipe us off the map. So that's one of our big legislative goals. So unfortunately, our committee hasn't met since October 6th. And I think this is really important when we go back into session with a new Speaker of the House, that the Select Committee goes back to work. And as Waltz just said a little bit ago, we have to recognize that our biggest adversary, China, is Iran's best friend. And China is no friend to Israel. They've called for a ceasefire in Gaza. As Waltz said, 1/3 of Iran's oil exports go to China. So we have to recognize that that threat is very much linked, and we have to do something about it. And I believed that on the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, that we're going to make that one of our big missions over the year left that we have in this Congress to move forward. It is a bipartisan committee, and that's the good part. The bad part is that the Democrats are so bad and weak on the China subject today that you think that in many ways the political interests that are most friendly to China own the Democrat Party today, and that's something that's very sad to me. Someone who grew up in a working class union household in Indiana, to know that the Democrat Party is the party that is most intertwined with the corporate interests that's selling us out to China each and every day. I wish that was more bipartisan, but today it's the Republicans, especially the Republicans in this majority, that are leading the way.
So our final question, Congressman Bacon and Congressman Donalds, border security is national security. President Biden comes in, and on day one, he starts implementing policies which, by design, open up our border. It's not just a Texas problem. We see it up in New York, the consequences of what has been a catastrophe, a crisis caused by the Biden administration. Now we have an appropriations process that's going on. The government is funded for another few weeks.